In the last 75 years, there have been 85 drugs approved for pediatric cancer. In the last 7 or 8 years, there have been 118 drugs approved for adults. Why? Because kids aren't meant to get sick. The problem with the way that we treat children is we treat them like little adults. So the same model that we use to quickly develop and deliver a drug for adults, we try to use the same model for children, and it doesn't work.
Welcome, MedTech Gurus. Today, as I mentioned in the introduction, we have an inspiring guest with us. Jim Foote is the CEO and founder of First Ascent Biomedical, a company redefining how cancer treatment decisions are made. Motivated by his own son's cancer journey, Jim launched a mission to end the guesswork in oncology through functional precision medicine, sometimes referred to as FPM. Jim brings a unique blend of personal passion and professional expertise with a background in biotech commercialization, organizational leadership, and scaling high-growth ventures. He has spent his career at the intersection of science and business. Before founding First Ascent, Jim held leadership roles where he guided teams through product development, market entry, and fundraising, experience he now channels into building a company at the forefront of oncology innovation. First Ascent's FPM platform combines tumor cell testing, genomic profiling, and AI to rank treatment options for each patient in just 10 days. In a Nature Medicine study, this approach achieved an 83% patient benefit rate, far surpassing genomics-only methods. With its second CLIA-certified lab opening in Miami this September, First Ascent is bringing scalable, automated, and accessible cancer testing to more families when time matters most. Hey, Jim, are you ready to be our guru today?
I'm ready.
Yeah, that's fantastic. We're excited to have you. So tell us something fun or interesting about yourself or your family so we can get to know you a little better.
Yeah, no, great question. So I'm 6'5". I'm probably 250 pounds. And I tell people I'm not a runner. I eat, and because I eat, I have to run. But I love running long distance events like Hood to Coast, where, you start at the top of the mountain and you run all the way to the coast, and it takes you 28 hours to do that. So
Wow.
I love doing that kind of stuff.
Wow, that sounds like you're in pretty good condition. That's amazing.
Yeah, don't kid yourself. It's this. You're only going to get so much performance out of this body. So,
yeah, I understand. So, Jim, you transition really from a deeply personal experience to building a company at the forefront of oncology. And I'm just kind of curious, what was the hardest part of making that leap from parent to entrepreneur? Can you give us some insights?
yeah, it's what most people don't realize until they hear that word cancer, they really think that the industry's got it figured out. And they do, by the way. It's been around for 100 years, and we've been testing and treating patients using the standard of care for a long time, and we've gradually improved the odds. But what people don't realize, Tom, is in 2025, cancer will be the number one killer of men and the number two killer of women under 50. It'll be the number one killer of children by disease type. 1 in 3 cancer patients die. In 2025, with all the drugs and all the technology and AI and everything we got going on, 1 in 3 cancer patients die. And my son was one of those 1 in 3. And what I saw when we walked this journey was an amazing set of doctors, nurses, hospital networks, insurance companies, and pharmaceutical companies all working together to save my son's life. But what I saw also was how few tools and technology that they had available to them to solve something as important as cancer. And I knew it was a solvable problem. I just couldn't solve it in time to save my son. But that became the genesis of the company because I had tools and technology at my fingertips available that I could make important decisions that doctors and nurses didn't have at their fingertips to make those same decisions about cancer. And so it was really that intersection between biology and technology that I really thought I could really transform healthcare.
Wow, well, thank you for sharing that deeply personal story. But it's really, after getting through the challenges of that, it's really inspiring to hear how that led to a path that might help patients down the road.
Yeah. Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah, that's
Well,
fantastic.
Tom, one of the things I say frequently is, cancer pissed off the wrong guy. And it might have won the battle, but this will be my final gift to society. I'm going to win the war, and I'm committed to doing it. And so that's what we're really excited about is educating people about what is functional precision medicine. How can it be applied now? Because I really believe firmly that what we're doing isn't new. What we're doing, though, we've created a technology that allows us to do it effectively, efficiently, inexpensively, and quickly. And that's because of technology and some of the advances that we've had in technology.
Yeah, yeah, that's amazing. And you said, if I've got this right, that cancer isn't one disease and no two patients are alike. Can you expand on why personalization is so critical in oncology today?
Yeah. Yeah. So cancer and cancer treatment, the standard of care, is built off of averages over a period of time, what they see work across the large patient population. So, Tom, if you and I got the same cancer, we would be treated exactly the same way, the same formulary, the same drugs. They would vary a little bit based on our age and our weight. But when the genome was mapped 20 years ago, what it showed us is biologically there are 8 billion people on this planet. And biologically, each of those 8 billion people are different. So if we acknowledge that every one of us is different, why would we be treating everybody based on averages if we have the opportunity to individualize, personalize that test? And so that's really, really what we do. And when you look at the cancer types, a cancer type will actually be hundreds of different cancer types. We classify it breast, lung, prostate. But when you look at all of the subtypes, all of the slight variations of each individual's cancer, it actually is a number of types and subtypes. And again, when you're treating with an average based standard of care, which works 2/3 of the time. But that third of the patients that don't fit that average is really where personalization comes into play because we're all unique. So why wouldn't our treatment be as unique as our fingerprint?
Yeah, yeah, I love that. And some of that, did some of that occur in terms of just trying to get FDA authorizations for treatments or trying to do off-label sorts of treatments with certain drugs? Was it just too much of a challenge for some of these companies to look for some of those other avenues?
Yeah, I mean, I think again, I'm going to offer my opinion, but
Hmm.
it is a complex system that has been in place for 100 years. We can't have 20,000 oncologists in America being mad scientists and coming up with their own concoction. So I understand that. We can't have drug companies, making drugs available, with lack of evidence and efficacy that doctors are using willy-nilly across the board. I totally get that. We can't have insurance companies having to foot the bill for all of that. I understand that. But in 2018, the FDA passed Congress passed what was called the right to try. And what it basically said was if you failed the standard of care and you have a life-threatening disease, then you as the patient have the right to try whatever means you need to save your own life. And what that did is it transferred a lot of that liability from the doctor to the patient. So now the patient is playing a more involved role in their own health care.
Hmm.
And so that's where we think the opportunity to, because what Right to Try did is it gave guidance to the FDA, to doctors, and to drug companies that if you can support a claim of efficacy, then you have the right to try this drug to save your own life.
Got it. Got it. And to build on that a little bit, First Ascent's approach, combines the functional testing, genomics, and AI, as we mentioned in the introduction. And maybe you can take us a little farther in terms of how this differentiates itself from genomics testing only. Can you
Yeah.
provide a little more detail there?
Yeah, I'm going to give you kind of a metaphor, and I think that this will paint the picture really well. Genomics was an amazing discovery 20 years ago. You have what's called DNA and RNA. DNA shows you what's broken. RNA shows you what's active. And if you know what's broken and active, you can find they're called biomarkers, and you can find a drug that will hit that biomarker. But it doesn't always it doesn't always make it effective, right? It just says, we have these two matches, and hopefully this will work. And what we've seen based on the evidence is that those two things work together, and they improve patient outcome by about 10 to 15%. And so that's good, right? They've moved the needle. And what First Ascent is doing is we're standing on the shoulders of those discoveries. So if you think about it like this, DNA and RNA, if we think of an orchestra, we've all been to an orchestra, right? DNA and RNA are like the music notes on a sheet of paper. Functional drug testing becomes the orchestra coming together and playing all of those notes on a piece of paper to create beautiful music. And AI is the conductor, changing the cadence of the orchestra in real time based on the harmonics of the facility and the density of the air and all of those types of things. And that's basically what we've created, bringing AI, functional drug testing, and genomics together to create that personalization at scale affordably.
Yeah, that's a really good explanation. I really appreciated that. That brought it home for me. And then I was also noting that in your Nature Medicine study, functional precision medicine delivered an 83% patient benefit rate, if I've got that right.
That's
So
correct.
that's amazing. And from your perspective, from an opinion standpoint, what do you think this approach is? How is it achieving such superior outcomes?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, because one of the things that we see is that it almost seems too good to be true.
Right.
But this is published evidence in peer review in a high impact journal like Nature Medicine, but what we're showing is exactly what you and I have been talking about for the last 3 or 4 minutes. Each one of us is individual. If your cancer comes back, doctors have very few choices. And so really they're left up to try and hope. And what we've transitioned them to is taking them from try and hope to test and treat. I'll give you an example. When my son's cancer came back, the doctor, these were his exact words, and I'll never forget them. Jim, we've already given it the best we've got, and it didn't work. Your son's cancer's come back. And then they asked me what I wanted to do next, because in their minds, the standard of care failed. I don't really know what to do next. And so I'm going to be guessing based on scientific evidence and my own whatever. But at the end of the day, it's try and hope. And what we're trying to move them to is test and know. And so what we've been able to see is that to your point, when doctors use our platform to help guide treatment, outcomes improve by 83%. And you would think that number would go down as the patient population increases. It's actually getting better. And we're starting to analyze pre-published data, and that number is improving. I can't say what that number is, but it is improving exponentially. And that's what's really exciting about what we're doing, is it takes the guesswork out of it, right? It tells a doctor in advance, in a clinically actionable time frame, what drugs will work for you, Tom, and what drugs won't work for you. And the same thing for me. And, it's interesting because we actually have a patient that we got a biopsy from them from the metastatic site and from their primary site. And we tested the library of drugs against both biopsies. And what we found was the drugs that worked on this site didn't work on this site, and conversely. And without a tool like ours and doing the analysis with AI, where we can find drugs that are synergistic between both, the doctor would never pick the right protocol, and it ultimately would be, a poor outcome for that patient.
Yeah, I love that from the standpoint of going back to your conductor, right? You're thinking, well, sometimes, maybe the strings can't carry the melody, so let's try the woodwinds, right? But just kind of knowing and having that information.
That's right. Yeah. And it's adjusting, it's making those adjustments in near real time. And we've all seen conductors, they're doing this, but then all of a sudden they'll point at these guys and they'll be like, raise it up a little bit. For whatever reason, the harmonics of your instruments aren't where they need to be, and you need to amplify that. So
yeah, very, very interesting. I love the analogy there, and it's really an exciting sort of outcomes that you're seeing. And then, Jim, as we all know, time is everything in cancer care.
yeah.
And I'm wondering if you can share with us, how you and your team are using robotics and automation to ensure that the test results are delivered quickly and cost effectively, because that really gets to the scale here, right? So help our gurus out there that are trying to scale a business. How are you doing that?
Yeah, as a technology geek, I love all of this stuff. And, what I will tell you is, and this is where, Tom, it's really an exciting time, because AI is starting to deliver against all of the promises it's been making for decades.
Mm-hmm.
And all of the time, we've been validating our AI engine for the last 7 or 8 years. Robotics, what used to take us 5 hours to plate all of these drugs on all of these cancer cells, now with robotics takes 5 minutes. We actually use, with higher precision, we actually use sound to dispense very precise amounts of the drugs in thousands of wells in 5 minutes. And it's amazing technology. And then when you look at genomic sequencing, genomic sequencing used to cost tens of thousands of dollars. Now, you can get it for under $1,000. If you had it commercially done, one of the genomic sequencers like Foundation or Tempest, they're going to charge you, I don't know, $4,000 or $5,000. But from an internal perspective, you could sequence the genome, full exome and transcriptome, for less than $1,000. And then what happens is all of that data that needs to be processed by your AI used to be expensive, but now it's only a few cents using cloud computing. And so you bring all of this together, and that's where you can offer something like this very affordably at scale.
Wow. Well, first of all, that's very creative, and congratulations for getting that. But I've been around long enough. I've been in some of those labs and seen some of those poor, technicians having to use it, and I just always wondered, how the heck do you avoid getting carpal tunnel or something when you do that?
Right.
And it's nice to see that robotics can do that as quickly as it can. And you mentioned earlier, we discussed earlier about childhood cancer rates, right, and how they've dramatically risen over the past 50 years. So, looking at, pediatric oncology and young adults, how are you trying to position yourself to support these patients and and their families?
Yeah, no, great question. It's really interesting about pediatric oncology because, what most people don't realize, I'll give you a couple of statistics, is in the last 75 years, there have been 85 drugs. So in 75 years, there have been 85 drugs approved for pediatric cancer. In the last 7 or 8 years, there have been 118 drugs approved for adults.
Wow.
Why? Because kids aren't meant to get sick. And the problem with the way that we treat children is we treat them like little adults. So the same model that we use to quickly develop and deliver a drug for adults, we try to use the same model for children, and it doesn't work. biologically, children are different. They're still growing. They still have, a high concentration of stem cells in their bodies that are rapidly growing them and helping them develop and all of these amazing things. So biologically, they're fundamentally different than adults. What most people don't realize, and this will be startling to you, 95% of families fall into financial distress when they have a child going through cancer, and 10 to 15% of them will actually move into the poor category because of the financial impact that families have, going through cancer. That just doesn't happen with adults. And so, I always say, again, and then some of the protocols, because again, children aren't supposed to get sick. The cancer that took my son's life hasn't changed in 40 years.
Wow.
And you think about that, all the tools and technology we've got, and you've got something. And so if we want better outcomes, we have to think about things a little bit differently. We can't treat children like adults. If you look at Australia has actually passed a bill at a government level that allocates for every child diagnosed with cancer, functional drug testing genomics. It's just part of the standard of care to treat children. So hopefully, again, we can adopt something very similar within the healthcare systems here in America that will really accelerate, better solutions to children faster.
Yeah, that's a really good explanation. And, I've got a background in health economics, and I'm, knowing that those childhood diseases are smaller in number in terms of total numbers of patients, right? But the
Right.
flip side of that is we should, as a society, be aware of that, because if something gets set up with a young individual and they're 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, they're probably going to carry that healthcare burden for the rest of their functional days moving forward.
Absolutely.
It's so expensive, right?
Yes. Well, and again, one of the children that we published in Nature Medicine, he was actually on Good Morning America. He's an excellent example of that, because the beauty of functional precision medicine is not only do we tell the oncologist what works, we also show them what doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
And so in this one patient's case, he had leukemia. We put his bone marrow into remission, but we actually showed the oncologist that this drug that would have zero effect was part of the standard of care and would have destroyed his heart for the rest of his life, but it would have had no effect. And so the doctor eliminated that drug and treated this child. And he's here today, healthy, happy. I think he's 10 years old now, doing everything a 10-year-old should be doing. One thing that I want to make sure that I'm absolutely clear on too, Tom, since this is a technology discussion, is it was interesting. There was a survey done about AI in healthcare. And then the question went like this: would you be comfortable, or do you think AI should help make medical decisions? And about 80% of the people said, yeah, I think so. And then the question was, would you like AI to make decisions about your healthcare? And it was almost inverse. It was like, no, it could make it for everybody else, but not for me. And I want to be clear, our AI doesn't tell a doctor what to do. Our AI tells the doctor, here's the drugs that work, and here's the ranking of those drugs, and here's the drugs that don't work. But it never replaces that doctor who looks you in the eye and goes, you know what, Tom, there's something that just doesn't look right about you. And I think this drug's going to be too harsh, but I think this drug will be just perfect for you. So that's basically what we do.
That's really interesting, because I'll just share with you, I was on a little bit of a road trip yesterday and listening to a major news channel, and they had a very well-known physician talking about a really similar topic about how do you feel when your patients come in with the AI, the Dr. Google generated. And his response was kind of interesting. He said, I don't mind that, because it tells me they're engaged, but and it gives us a chance to talk about it. And he goes, you know what? Sometimes I learn things. Right.
Yes.
But he goes, what I don't like is when people take that information and then they seek treatment or get treatment without the doctor's input.
That's
So I
right.
think that's exactly what you're doing is you're helping, maybe giving a playbook or that orchestra score that then the medical team can make
Right.
the appropriate decisions.
I mean, we're giving a personalized playbook on an individual level to every cancer patient that that can help their doctor guide treatment. If I had a magic wand, again, I believe that if you have a board certified medical oncologist ready to treat with a drug, and you have an evidence based technology that shows that drug is effectiveness. If you meet those two criteria, then insurance approval should be almost automatic.
Yeah.
And I think ultimately that's where hopefully healthcare is going. It's really interesting. The National Cancer Institute just named Anthony Lattai, Dr. Lattai, as their head of the National Cancer Institute. Dr. Lattai is from Dana-Farber, but he was also the president of the Society for Functional Precision Medicine, and who one of our co-founders sat on the board with. But I see that as a very strong signal of where Health and Human Services is really trying to navigate, because they see this immense need, to improve healthcare or cancer care. One of the things a lot of people don't realize is the cancer burden on our globe is 0.5 point of our global GDP. 50% of those diagnosed with cancer around the world outside of the US die.
Oh,
that's a horrible statistic.
That is for sure. So, Jim, shifting to the company for a moment now, a lot of our gurus out there are, entrepreneurs or soon-to-be entrepreneurs, and I'm wondering if you can give us some insights. Building a mission-driven company is really no small feat. So I'm wondering how you keep your team motivated and connected to the mission during all these ups and downs as you take this journey. Do you have any insights for our gurus out there?
Yeah. Well, when I started, I had a full head of hair. No, you know what? It really requires a lot of determination, and you have to surround yourself with people that share the same, I call it the same North Star. And it doesn't matter if you're an investor, if you're an associate on the team, if you're a co-founder, you have to have the same North Star. And our North Star is we have one enemy, and that enemy is cancer. And we all have to be rowing in that same direction to conquer cancer. We're not going to choose teams. And what I mean by choosing teams is, to us, every life with cancer matters. It doesn't matter if you're rich. It doesn't matter if you're poor. It doesn't matter if you live in another country. It doesn't matter how you identify. If you got cancer, we want to help you. Drug companies are not the enemy. They are here to try to help cure cancer. Hospitals and insurance companies and your doctor, they are not the enemy. Everybody's trying to row in the same direction to really solve this problem. And it is I'm not saying everybody, but it's saying align yourself with those who share the same North Star as you. And I wouldn't compromise. If you have, as an entrepreneur, you'll see lots of people. And if their actions don't match their words, then they don't share the same North Star as you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very helpful. And you mentioned investors, so it leads me to raising money in med tech and in oncology is always a challenge. So for our gurus out there, have you developed any best practices or lessons learned that you can share with us about fundraising and building investor confidence?
Yeah, that's a really tough one, because it's there is a traditional investment cycle, right? You raise a little bit of money, you prove a little bit of results, you keep parlaying it on. What I would say makes us a little bit different is, and I would recommend this to everybody, is a lot of companies have an idea, they make a claim, they raise some money, they try to prove the claim, they raise more money. We've actually done it in reverse. Our platform's been built probably on $15 million of non-dilutive funding from private philanthropic groups, the federal government, and so on and so forth. And that allowed us to take the technology, to validate it, to publish the results, and then we started raising money to really accelerate the company. But even with that, it is challenging because investors look at you as a factory. I put money into the factory and I expect to get returns out in a relatively short amount of time. And in healthcare, it's a little bit different because you also have to remember to transform healthcare takes a generation. And so most investors are a little bit leery in investing in a company like ours because they don't have a generation to wait. And we'll get it done a lot sooner than a generation. But what that actually hurts is it hurts a lot of this innovation that will help patients because investors will invest in a drug company every day of the week because it's like hitting the lottery and the turn is 3 to 5 years. And so with ours, the vision is a lot longer, and we can help that drug discovery and we can help that drug development. But the way we're going to help drug discovery and drug development is as we establish that patient pipeline and we can test hundreds of drugs, we can now start bringing in new therapeutics, creating that data set in near real time and returning that data back to the patient, to the pharmaceutical company. If I can give you one example, we have a drug that we've been testing from a very large pharmaceutical company. And it's a drug that is primarily used for lymphoma. And what we found is that drug is very, very, very effective against sarcomas. In fact, we had one patient that was at home. It was a child at home on hospice. The child, the doctor found out about our technology, enrolled him into the study. We guided treatment. Treatment began. And in less than 2 months, this child went from hospice to back to school to playing football. Wow. I mean, this is a letter that I got from a doctor just a few weeks ago. And that's really the message, Tom, is this isn't theoretical. We're helping patients today in the clinic. We're guiding, you hear the cancer moonshot. We all heard about it, right? I'm telling you, we've landed on the moon. We've treated patients on the moon. We have deployed a field hospital on the moon. Patients are benefiting today because of this technology. And it's all about scaling at this point. Yeah. So,
well, no, that's awesome. And with that, Jim, that was really very helpful. Is there one piece of advice you'd give our gurus and our entrepreneurs out there, working at this intersection of, personal passion and medical innovation?
Yeah, it's hard. And it is hard. And you're going to hit a lot of obstacles. And you have to figure out a way through them and around them. And you have to build, it is an ecosystem, at least with what we're doing, it's an ecosystem. And I call them gatekeepers. And you have to understand, they're not becoming obstacles because they just want to be obstacles. They're reluctant and resistant because, life and safety has to be put above everything else, at least in the medtech space. And I 100% agree. But I also use the metaphor of SpaceX, right? If you take oncology or you take the medical industry for the most part is exactly where NASA was. They couldn't innovate. And along comes SpaceX, and we know what happened there. Faster, cheaper, and safer. And so, but you have to be patient. You have to look at all of these barriers and then you have to figure out how to solve for that problem. You can't ignore it. The first gatekeeper, the patient, that's easy. The second gatekeeper, the doctor. Okay, once they see the value this produces, they're on board. Next gatekeeper, insurance companies, right? I can't spend any more money. The next gatekeeper, the drug company and the FDA. And so you really have to be a problem solver. You have to be a big picture thinker, and you have to figure out a way to bring them into the solution, not make them the enemy and alienate them.
Yeah. That's remarkable. I appreciate that. And what I hear you saying is, with all those gatekeepers, you're developing that buy-in, that partnership with them, right? Which I would think takes a lot of information and a lot of listening too, I would think.
Which I'm horrible at. Just ask my wife.
So, Jim, this seems like a really exciting time for Ascent Biomedical. What does the future hold? Where are you and your team going from here?
Yeah, so right now we've completed 5 clinical studies. We have 3 more in the pipeline. I hate to call them clinical studies because we're not studying. We're returning results, we're guiding treatment, and patients are getting better. We have a CLIA lab now open, which allows us to operate outside of a clinical study. So if Jim Foote got cancer tomorrow, I could actually send my biopsy to our lab. They can return results. The doctor could guide treatment based on that. And that's, I can't tell you the burden that lifts off me, because it's just, I'm so tired of saying we're close, but not yet. And so, it was, I think, middle of September that we got our full CLIA validation, which gave us the opportunity to offer this outside of a clinical trial. Now it's all about scaling. Right now we have our lab in Miami that's got a patient capacity of about 2,000. We already have a second lab that up in Erie, Pennsylvania at Gannon University that will have a capacity of 15,000. And it will be coming online probably in the late fall of 2026, but it will really service all of the patients that are within that region easily. There are 150,000 Americans that will die from cancer in 2025 within 150 miles of Erie, Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. So we're really excited about that. And then from there, we will start looking about, extending our platform across America, and then, international, and start exploring what those opportunities look like. Now, obviously, we're trying to strengthen our relationship with pharmaceutical companies, because ultimately, we believe we can help them accelerate the right drug for the right patient at the right time, and actually provide them the data that accelerates that process, and work with the FDA to help that happen.
Yeah, I was wondering about that. That seems like a natural.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So, Jim, first of all, I'd like to acknowledge and thank you for the time and information that you brought us today as our guru. If somebody wants to learn more, is there a website? Are you on LinkedIn, social media? How do we learn more about you and your team?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you just go to firstascentbio.com, and there's an info link, you can click on that. We have a patient portal. You can click on that. Would love for you to follow both First Ascent and Jim Foote on LinkedIn. Reach out to me on LinkedIn, DM me. I'll probably text message you because I'm a big texter. It's connect with us. Anybody on our team, and again, it's not about promoting our company. It's about bringing awareness and understanding around functional precision medicine. Obviously, if you're in this situation, God forbid, we hope you choose us. But more importantly, we hope you choose a functional precision medicine that's right for you, and really understand how many drugs can they test, have they been clinically validated, and how quickly can they return results. And if I can help you solve those problems, I would love to hear from you.
Oh, that's terrific. So, Jim, once again, thank you so much. It's been a great conversation. I really enjoyed the time with you and the information you provided.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Anytime.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to MedTech Gurus. I am Sylvester Harris, your MC. If you want to learn more about Tom and his consulting services, you can go to www.pctmedical.com or email Tom at tom@pctmedical.com. Now, I can be reached at Sylvester Harris, that's SYLVESTER, harris5048@gmail.com, and I'd be pleased to discuss any voiceover work that you may want for your company or broadcast. Hey, thanks so much for listening, and catch us on the next episode of MedTech Gurus.